Welcome to the Darkling Radio, a place where nightmares breathe and shadows whisper. Here, we bring you chilling first-person horror stories told in an immersive style that will keep you on edge until the very last word. Turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and step into the dark. Alina Ward thought her weekend escape to Las Vegas would be nothing more than flashing lights, endless drinks, and sleepless nights. But from the second she checked into her hotel, she realized the city wasn't just alive with people, it was alive with something else. Something that had already noticed her. The lights of Las Vegas hit me harder than I expected. Stepping out of the cab, I felt like I had walked into another world. The neon burned against the night sky, signs flashing in every color, pulling people in like moths to flames. Music thumped from every direction, and the crowds moved in a restless tide, laughing, shouting, drunk with freedom. Yet behind the noise and brightness, there was something heavy pressing against me, something I couldn't name. The air itself felt wrong, too thick, like it carried secrets no one dared to speak. I dragged my suitcase through the hotel lobby, trying to shake the unease. The place was grand, gold chandeliers glittering overhead, slot machines chiming endlessly, people cheering at tables stacked with chips. But the farther I went, the more it felt like a mask, something staged to distract from what hid behind it. The front desk clerk smiled, handed me my key, and told me to enjoy my stay. Her lips curved, but her eyes were flat, lifeless, as though she'd repeated the same phrase for years without meaning a word. The elevator ride felt endless. The floor numbers ticked upward slowly, and I caught my own reflection in the polished doors. My face looked drained, pale, as if the desert heat had already stolen something from me. When the doors finally slid open, I stepped into a hallway that stretched far longer than seemed possible. The patterned carpet swirled beneath my feet, twisting shapes that made my eyes ache if I stared too long. Each step echoed faintly, swallowed too quickly by the silence. My room looked ordinary enough at first glance. A king-size bed, glossy furniture, heavy curtains drawn against the neon glow outside. But the silence unsettled me. Despite the strip roaring just beyond the windows, not a sound made it inside. It was as if the room had been sealed shut from the world, trapped in its own bubble of stillness. I tossed my bag on the bed and tried to laugh at myself, but my voice fell flat, absorbed by the thick air. I walked to the bathroom, washed my face, and stared at the mirror. The light above flickered once before steadying. My reflection looked tired, but it wasn't just that. For a brief second it didn't move exactly as I did. When I tilted my head it hesitated before following. I froze, heart racing, but the image smoothed back into sync. I shook it off, blaming fatigue. Night came fast, even though the city outside never seemed to dim. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to tune out the buzzing in my ears. Sleep refused to come. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt something stir in the room. The air shifted, cold drafts brushing against my skin. Though no vent was open, I rolled over, pulling the blanket tighter, but the sensation of being watched grew unbearable. My eyes drifted back to the mirror across from the bed. The faint glow of the city lights seeped through the curtains, just enough to reflect my shape. I blinked, and for an instant, I saw myself standing near the dresser, though I hadn't moved from the bed. I sat up sharply, breath caught in my throat. The reflection settled back into place, as if mocking me. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was overtired, my mind playing tricks, but the longer I stared, the more wrong it seemed. My reflection felt delayed, just a fraction of a second behind me, like it was watching carefully before mimicking. The face staring back looked pale, too pale, the eyes slightly darker than mine. I pulled the blanket over my head, trembling, trying to will myself into sleep. The silence deepened, pressing on my chest until it was hard to breathe. Just as I began to slip into uneasy rest, a sound cracked the stillness. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. They didn't come from the door, they came from the mirror. Morning came, but it brought no relief. Sunlight slipped through the heavy curtains, yet the room still seemed dim, as though the walls absorbed the brightness instead of letting it spread. My eyes burned from the little sleep I had managed, and my body felt heavier than it should have after just one restless night. I wanted to forget about what I thought I heard, to brush it away as nothing but exhaustion and imagination. But the memory of those knocks clung to me, louder in my mind than when they had echoed in the room. I forced myself to leave the hotel room, hoping a crowd would ease the unease. The casino floor was alive with sound and movement, the complete opposite of the suffocating silence upstairs. Slot machines clanged endlessly, the reels spinning in hypnotic patterns. People shouted over games, stacks of chips rattled, music pulsed faintly from somewhere unseen. Yet, even in all that chaos, something was off. The laughter didn't sound genuine. The smiles looked practiced, stretched too wide on faces that blurred together if I looked too long. They seemed like actors, going through the motions of joy, hollow beneath the surface. I sat at a blackjack table, trying to ground myself in something ordinary. Cards slapped the felt, chips clicked, the dealer's hands moved with mechanical precision. For a few moments I managed to focus on the game, but soon I felt its eyes on me. I shifted, glancing around, and there he was. A man in a dark suit stood at the edge of the crowd. His face was blank, his jaw rigid, his skin pale under the fluorescent lights. The reflective glasses he wore hid his eyes completely, which made his gaze unbearable. Every time I looked back, he was closer, though I never saw him take a step. I left the table abruptly, pushing through the crowd. The sound of slot machines and voices melted into static in my ears. I moved quickly, weaving between tourists, trying to lose sight of the man. For a moment, I thought I had. But when I stepped outside into the blinding heat of the strip, he was there again, standing at a distance, perfectly still, facing me as if he had been waiting. The streets outside should have comforted me, with their relentless energy, music and shouting vendors, but walking through the crowd I felt invisible. People brushed past me, never looking, never noticing. It was like I wasn't really there, drifting through the noise as a ghost among the living. My stomach turned when I realized the suited man wasn't following me through the crowd. Instead, he was ahead of me, already waiting at the entrance of my hotel. My legs carried me back inside before I realized what I was doing. I needed the safety of my room, even if I dreaded it. The hallway seemed longer than before, stretching into shadow despite the lights burning above. My footsteps echoed strangely, out of rhythm with my pace, as though something walked behind me. When I opened the door to my room, the air felt heavier than the day before. The mirror across from the bed caught my eye immediately, though I wished it hadn't. It seemed larger somehow, stretching closer to the ceiling, wider across the wall, as if it had grown while I was gone. My own reflection stared back at me, but the sight drained the blood from my face. The color of my skin looked washed away, my eyes sunken, and there was no life in them. I stepped closer, telling myself I was imagining it. But as I leaned near, I realized something that turned my stomach. The reflection wasn't matching me anymore. It was standing completely still, even when I lifted my hand to touch the glass. And then, with a sudden twitch, its lips curled upward into a smile. My own face hadn't moved. I froze, heart hammering, breath shallow, unable to look away. The smile grew sharper, wider, stretching into something inhuman. My skin prickled with the cold certainty that what looked back at me was no longer me at all. That night I told myself I wouldn't sleep. I couldn't. The thought of closing my eyes and leaving myself vulnerable in that room was unbearable. I sat on the edge of the bed with the lamp burning, staring at the mirror as if keeping watch would hold it back. The air felt dense, as though the walls themselves leaned inward, shrinking the space around me. My reflection lingered where it always was, but it wasn't still. Each time I blinked, I swore it shifted slightly, like a photograph that had been altered when I wasn't looking. The hours dragged on, the clock ticking louder than it should, every second an accusation against my sanity. My eyelids grew heavier despite my determination. I pinched my arm, paced the room, even splashed water on my face, but the weight of exhaustion pressed harder. At some point, without meaning to, I nodded off. A soft sound dragged me back from sleep, faint and scraping, like a whisper pressed against glass. My eyes snapped open, and my stomach dropped. The reflection was no longer sitting where I was. It was pressed against the inside of the mirror, palms flat against the surface, its face twisted with hunger. Its eyes gleamed darker than mine ever had, and its grin revealed too many teeth. The glass didn't just reflect anymore, it shifted, bending outward as though it were liquid. A ripple ran across its surface, spreading from the reflection's hands. My skin crawled with the certainty that the barrier wasn't going to hold. I stumbled back, knocking into the dresser, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I lunged for the door, desperate to get out. But when I grabbed the handle, it wouldn't turn. I twisted and pulled until my knuckles burned, but the lock refused to move. Panic swelled in my chest. I screamed, pounding against the wood, but the sound never came. My throat strained, my mouth open, yet no noise left me. The silence swallowed everything. I turned back to the mirror in time to see the first arm push through. The reflection's pale, dripping hand stretched into the room, wet and slick with darkness that dripped onto the carpet and vanished before it could stain. The other hand followed, pulling its body through with a jerking, unnatural motion. Its movements didn't flow, they snapped, like something struggling to imitate life but not understanding how. It stepped forward, and the air grew colder with each twitch of its limbs. Its smile widened as it approached, head tilting unnaturally, eyes locked on me with ravenous focus. My back hit the wall, my body refusing to move further, legs heavy as though the air itself pinned me in place. It leaned in close enough that I could see the blackness spreading in the cracks of its skin, veins of shadow pulsing beneath its surface. Its breath was icy, each exhale sinking into my bones. Its mouth opened, whispering words I couldn't hear, yet somehow, deep inside, I understood it was claiming me. My vision blurred, the room spinning, and then everything went still. The air changed, and when I blinked again, I wasn't standing against the wall anymore. I was looking at the bed from a distance. The reflection, or whatever it was, had crawled beneath the sheets, curling into the position I had been in earlier, as though it belonged there. Horror rooted me where I stood, until I realized something even worse. I wasn't in the room at all. I was in the mirror, staring through the glass at the thing wearing my face, my hands pressed against the inside, my breath fogging the surface. but nothing happened. I screamed silently, pounding the barrier, watching as the creature stretched out comfortably, smiling faintly at the ceiling like it had always been me. I was no longer on the outside looking in. I was trapped, and the thing in my place had no intention of letting me out. Time didn't move the same way once I was inside the mirror. There was no sun, no nightfall, just a gray, stagnant glow that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. The air was stale, heavy with a sour rot that burned the back of my throat. My legs trembled under me as I turned in circles, trying to make sense of the place. It looked like my hotel room, but ruined peeling wallpaper, damp carpets that squished under my feet, curtains hanging in tatters. Everything familiar was twisted into something rotten, a reflection of reality that had been abandoned and left to decay. I rushed to the glass, pressing my palms against it, desperate to break through. On the other side, my double lived in my place. I watched it walk across the room, its movements smoother now, almost elegant. It rummaged through my suitcase, slipped on my jacket, and smirked faintly at its own reflection before stepping out the door. The sound of the latch echoed in my ears, but here, in this world, no door would open for me. I screamed, slammed my fists against the surface until my knuckles split, but the sound didn't exist. There was no echo, no acknowledgement, just the endless silence pressing in. Behind me, the air shifted. I froze, a cold dread sliding down my spine. When I turned, I wasn't alone anymore. Shapes emerged from the shadows, pale figures slipping out of corners that hadn't been there moments before. Their bodies were thin, twisted, their eyes cloudy and lifeless, but their faces, some of them looked like me. Others looked like strangers. All of them wore expressions of exhaustion, pain, and hopelessness. They moved without sound, their bare feet dragging across the carpet, their mouths working silently as though whispering words I couldn't hear. One of them stepped closer, its face nearly identical to mine but broken. The skin peeled in strips, teeth cracked, eyes clouded with a milky haze. It raised one finger and pressed it against my lips, an eerie gesture of silence. Then it turned its head toward the glass, toward the reflection that had stolen my life, and I understood what it meant. I wasn't the first. None of us were. I staggered back, shaking my head, unwilling to accept it. The other figures drew closer, circling me in a slow, deliberate way. Their heads twitched, their hands stretching out but never quite touching. They were studying me, testing me, waiting. I pressed against the glass again, pleading silently for release, but my double never looked my way. It was too busy living, smiling, blending into the world outside while I rotted here. Days or something like them slipped past. I watched from the mirror as it thrived. It laughed at strangers, gambled with my money, walked the bright streets I could no longer reach. It was better at being me than I ever had been. Each time it returned to the room, it glanced at the mirror with a mocking grin, acknowledging my prison without offering escape. Then it lay down, closed its eyes, and slept peacefully while I stood in the dark, surrounded by shadows. The other trapped souls began to crowd closer the longer I stayed. Their whispers grew louder, a language I couldn't understand but somehow felt. It vibrated in my bones, like a hum beneath the skin. They weren't angry. They were welcoming me, folding me into their silent congregation. And the more they closed in, the weaker I felt, as though their presence was stripping pieces of me away. One of them finally touched me. Its hand was cold, flesh sagging like wax, and the moment its fingers brushed mine, I felt something drain from me. My knees buckled, my body trembling violently as a wave of despair sank into my chest. I pulled away, but the figure only tilted its ruined head, almost curious, before pointing at the reflection once more. Its cloudy eyes locked on mine, and I knew it was telling me to stop fighting, to accept what I had become. I backed against the wall, surrounded by the ruined room, the smell of rot thick in my lungs, while outside, my double smiled into a world that would never know I was gone. I don't know how long I existed in that place. Time didn't move in straight lines anymore. It stretched and warped until minutes bled into hours and hours into days, or maybe weeks. Hunger faded, thirst disappeared, and all that remained was the constant weight of despair pressing against my chest. I no longer felt human. I was something else now, trapped, stripped of warmth, my body just a shadow flickering in a prison of glass and decay. The others never left me alone. They gathered around more often, drifting closer until their pale forms brushed against me. Their whispers grew louder, crawling into my ears, even though I didn't understand the words. Sometimes I thought they were laughing, other times it sounded like weeping. They surrounded me like a family I had never chosen, their ruined faces watching me with cloudy, empty eyes. When I tried to run from them, the room stretched, endless in every direction, and no matter how far I went, I always ended up back at the mirror, staring into the life that wasn't mine anymore. The reflection thrived. It lived my life better than I ever had. I watched it walk confidently through the casino, drinks in hand, people surrounding it like moths to a flame. It moved with ease, perfectly blending in, perfectly human. When it looked into a mirror in the world outside, I braced myself each time, wondering if it would glance at me. For days it didn't. It ignored me completely. But one night, everything changed. I saw it return to the hotel room, moving slowly this time, as though savoring something. It locked a door behind it, then stood in front of the mirror. For the first time it looked directly at me, its grin stretched impossibly wide, eyes gleaming with something unnatural, a knowing satisfaction. Then it raised its hand and pressed its palm flat against the glass. The barrier rippled like water. My heart froze. The glass that had held me prisoner began to dissolve, its edges softening into liquid. Behind me the other trapped figures stirred. Their whispers grew frantic, echoing in the ruined air. Their mouths stretched into silent screams, their faces twisting with a panic I had never seen from them before. They surged forward, clawing at me, pulling me back into the shadows. I struggled against them, but their grip was ice, their hands sinking into my skin like tar. The reflection stepped closer, its body sliding through the dissolving glass, emerging fully into the room. Darkness dripped from its skin, seeping into the carpet and vanishing like smoke. Its eyes glowed faintly red, flickering with hunger and triumph. It left me behind without hesitation, walking confidently into my world, while I was dragged further into theirs. The void swallowed me. Cold wrapped around every inch of my body until I couldn't feel where I ended and the shadows began. My vision blurred, and then it went completely black. For what felt like forever, I floated in nothingness, stripped of sound, light, and thought. Then I woke. I was lying in the hotel bed, drenched in sweat, the sheets heavy against my skin. For a moment, I thought it had all been a nightmare. The curtains were drawn, the lamp was still on, and everything looked exactly as it had before. My chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, and I tried to convince myself I was safe, but the smell in the air told me otherwise. It was thick with iron, metallic and sharp, like rust and blood. When I pushed the blanket back, my stomach lurched. The sheets were soaked in something dark, sticky against my skin. My hands were stained red, dripping with it, though I had no memory of how it got there. I stumbled to my feet, shaking, searching the room for answers, but the mirror was gone. In its place was a blank wall, spotless and bare, as though no mirror had ever existed there at all. The phone rang. The shrill sound shattered the silence and froze me in place. My hand trembled as I reached for the receiver. I pressed it to my ear, and a voice spoke on the other end. It was my own voice, calm, steady, and confident. It told me not to be afraid. It told me I had finally taken my place, and in the reflection of the black screen of the TV across the room, I saw it again, the smile.